engaged for 5 years, and we're not getting any closer to that day when we carry each other across the threshold. Gee, Al, I'm not getting any younger, and after all, when I get married and have children...
Hollywood loves to pretend its golden age stars were glamorous, sophisticated, and effortlessly brilliant. But behind the glitter, the truth was often much dumber. Studios polished their images, fed them pre-written quotes, staged fake IQ stories, and sometimes banned them from speaking without supervision. But even the best PR in the world couldn't completely hide the chaos. From bombshells who couldn't separate movies from reality, to leading men who couldn't hit their marks, to directors who thought plot was optional. This is the side of Hollywood the golden era never wanted you to see. So buckle up, because today we're exposing 10 golden age stars who were shockingly, hilariously, unforgettably stupid. Marie Wilson. The star who couldn't tell fiction from reality. Marie Wilson rose to fame in the 1930s and 40s, playing innocent, scatterbrained characters in films and on radio, most famously as Irma in My Friend Irma. Audiences loved her wide-eyed charm, breathy voice, and comedic cluelessness. What they didn't know was that Wilson's on-screen persona wasn't far from her real-life limitations. Studio insiders admitted that Wilson often struggled to distinguish plotlines from real events. While filming My Friend Irma, she repeatedly asked cast members whether situations in the script had truly happened to her, forcing directors to clarify what was fictional before each scene. Writers learned to keep her dialogue extremely simple because she became confused whenever lines referenced events earlier in the story. Her challenges extended beyond acting. Wilson's publicity handlers routinely prepped her with basic information before interviews, such as the name of her co-star or the premise of her latest film. Yet she often forgot it moments later. During one press tour, she introduced herself as her character, Irma, in multiple interviews, having briefly convinced herself the two identities were interchangeable. Financial matters were even more problematic. Agents reported that Wilson had little understanding of contracts, percentages, or even whether she was paid weekly or per film. She once attempted to return a paycheck because she believed she'd been given someone else's money, not realizing it was her salary. Despite these issues, Wilson remained a studio favorite because her natural innocence translated into endearing comedy. The problem was that the industry capitalized on her confusion rather than supporting her. Publicists exaggerated her real-life naivete into a selling point, framing her as the ultimate lovable ditz, while quietly compensating for the behind-the-scenes chaos. What made Marie Wilson's case especially striking was that her limitations shaped her entire career. Unlike other stars who played dumb strategically, Wilson struggled to fully understand the stories she acted in or the business surrounding them. Yet her sincerity and charm kept her working for decades, proving that in Hollywood, even profound confusion could be turned into a marketable brand. George Raft. The king of catastrophic career choices, George Raft didn't just make a few bad decisions, he built his entire career on them. He famously turned down Casablanca's Rick Blaine, The Maltese Falcon's Sam Spade, and High Sierra's Roy Earle, roles that launched Humphrey Bogart into stardom. Raft's instincts were so consistently wrong that studio executives joked he had a supernatural talent for picking the worst possible option. His refusals weren't random. Raft rejected any role where the character died, showed weakness, or displayed emotional complexity. He wanted to remain a flawless tough guy, and in doing so, passed on the layered characters that made Bogart iconic. He simply couldn't understand why audiences connected with flawed or conflicted men. His business choices were equally disastrous. He repeatedly accepted lower-paying, forgettable B-movies because they fit his narrow persona, turning down higher salaries and prestige projects in the process. According to insiders, Raft walked away from millions just to avoid playing characters with depth. Directors observed that Raft struggled with anything beyond surface-level motivation. He could play a man chasing money, but if the script required symbolic or emotional interpretation, he was lost. Even after Casablanca won Best Picture, he reportedly still didn't understand the film's appeal. Despite this, Raft wasn't without ability. In simple, hard-edged roles like Scarface, 1932, he could be charismatic and effective. His downfall wasn't a lack of talent, it was the inability to recognize growth opportunities or trust people who understood story and character better than he did. Instead of becoming a legend, he became Hollywood's textbook example of how bad judgment can sink a promising career. Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield was promoted as Marilyn Monroe's rival, a platinum blonde bombshell with a supposedly sky-high IQ, fluency in multiple languages, and advanced academic credentials. Studios staged photos of her reading philosophy books, even in bubble baths, to reinforce the myth of a brilliant beauty. But insiders described a very different reality. Mansfield struggled with basic conversations and often appeared genuinely confused about simple facts. Crew members recalled her asking why California couldn't be moved closer to New York to shorten flights, and during a European press tour, she seemed unsure whether Europe ever had summer, confusing major cities and cultures along the way. Her public ditzy blonde act was not entirely an act. She often couldn't separate performance from reality. She memorized impressive vocabulary to appear intelligent, but used words incorrectly, leaving co-stars puzzled. One director eventually relied on a color-coded emotional system just to help her understand scenes. Her interest in the occult added to the confusion. Mansfield's involvement with Anton LaVey damaged her reputation, yet she reportedly couldn't understand why, believing that if devils weren't real, the public couldn't be offended, missing how image and perception shaped her career. Colleagues also noted her inability to sense mockery. Some directors fed her elaborate, meaningless compliments simply to see her repeat them proudly. Others watched her attempt to join serious conversations by inserting memorized intellectual phrases at the wrong moments, only to panic when she realized she'd misused them. Despite her determination to maintain the image of a highly intelligent star, those around her saw a painful disconnect between the persona and the reality. And while Mansfield's struggles were often masked by glamour, the next Hollywood figure would earn notoriety for reasons far less easily disguised. Mamie Van Doren. In the 1950s, Hollywood pushed Mamie Van Doren as its next Marilyn Monroe, glamorous, witty, and packaged as smarter than the average bombshell. But off-camera, she struggled with even basic facts, turning unscripted interviews into near disasters. Publicists often stood just out of frame, ready to rescue her when she veered into confusion, which happened almost immediately. Her grasp of history became legendary. She once claimed World War II happened in the 1970s and insisted Abraham Lincoln invented the telephone. When Alexander Graham Bell was mentioned, she confidently identified him as the man who rang the Liberty Bell. Studios quickly realized the risk and tightly scripted every public appearance, training her to give a handful of rehearsed answers, regardless of the question. Her later autobiography only confirmed the depth of her confusion, filled with impossible timelines, fictional terminology, and accounts of meeting people who had died years earlier. Publishers described it as history written by someone to whom time had no real structure. What made her situation especially poignant was her genuine desire to be taken seriously. She tried to participate in intellectual conversations, but often derailed them with responses completely disconnected from reality. Still, she maintained a long career because studios learned to work around her, casting her in roles that emphasized appearance over dialogue. While Van Doren struggled with chronology and basic facts, the next Hollywood figure required productions to be redesigned entirely to accommodate his limitations. Tony Curtis. The handsome star with an empty attic, Tony Curtis rose to fame on his striking looks, charm, and effortless screen presence. By the 1950s and 60s, he was one of Hollywood's biggest draws, starring in classics like Some Like It Hot, Spartacus, and The Defiant Ones. But behind the polished performances, filmmakers often had to work around a surprising limitation. Curtis struggled deeply with abstract thinking, subtext, and complex material. Those who worked with him described a magnetic performer who could light up a scene, yet faltered the moment discussions turned conceptual. He frequently mixed up authors, misunderstood major works, and showed only a surface-level understanding of storytelling. His idea of acting was famously simplistic: say the lines loudly and with style. Nuance, motivation, or emotional layers were concepts he couldn't connect to. This became especially clear on projects requiring sophistication. On Spartacus, Stanley Kubrick had to walk him through lines word by word, explaining vocabulary, context, and emotional reasoning. Curtis often responded by suggesting he simply deliver the lines louder, believing volume equaled drama. His struggles with Shakespeare were even more pronounced. He viewed the language as outdated grammar and pushed for normal English. Not realizing this undermined the entire point of the play. Despite these limitations, Curtis sustained a long career because studios learned to tailor roles to his strengths: simple dialogue, clear direction, and characters driven more by charisma than complexity. When scripts were straightforward, his instinctive emotional connection could produce memorable performances, even if he couldn't articulate how he achieved them. Curtis proved that natural charm and emotional intuition can sometimes compensate for intellectual gaps. But unlike him, the next Hollywood star struggled with fundamentals so basic that crews had to guide him through scenes step by step. Sonny Tufts. Sonny Tufts became one of Hollywood's most reliable punchlines in the 1940s and 1950s. His name alone guaranteed a laugh, thanks to a reputation for incompetence so widespread that comedians used him as shorthand for professional disaster. The irony was that Tufts started with every possible advantage: wealthy Boston upbringing, Yale education, and classic leading man looks. Yet instead of becoming a star, he became a liability. Those who worked with him described a mix of poor judgment, confusion, and heavy drinking that derailed even the simplest tasks. He once arrived on the wrong movie set and insisted he must be the star, and during a wartime Bond tour suggested the military simply start later so he wouldn't have to wake up early. His drinking turned these blunders into full-scale embarrassments, including a notorious incident where he was found passed out in a children's petting zoo during a charity event. Paramount Studios eventually gave up defending him and issued public apologies for his behavior, an unprecedented move in an era when studios covered up nearly everything. Directors resorted to filming his lines one at a time because he couldn't remember more than a few words, likening the process to managing an uncooperative child. What made Tufts' decline especially tragic was that he showed early promise, particularly in So Proudly We Hail, 1943. But his inability to meet basic professional expectations turned him into a Hollywood cautionary tale. As one insider put it, a trained dog was easier to work with. While Tufts embraced his chaotic reputation, the next Hollywood figure worked tirelessly and painfully to conceal her own limitations. Tab Hunter. The heartthrob who couldn't find his mark. In the 1950s, Warner Brothers built Tab Hunter into a teen idol by tightly controlling every aspect of his public image: simple roles, scripted appearances, and nothing that required quick thinking. His looks made him a star, but behind the camera, Hunter struggled with fundamental production basics. Directors reported that he frequently forgot where to stand, which direction to walk, or how to hit simple marks. Crews resorted to placing tape on the floor and using frantic off-camera signals just to guide him through scenes. Dialogue posed the same challenge. He memorized lines as disconnected words, resulting in misplaced emphasis, odd pacing, and repeated mistakes, even after coaching. Press tours exposed these difficulties further. Publicists created cheat sheets explaining the films he was promoting, yet he often forgot the plot or his character's name. Co-stars routinely stepped in to steer interviews before it became obvious he didn't understand the questions. Warner Brothers accepted these limitations because Hunter was profitable. They kept his roles uncomplicated, surrounded him with patient directors, and shielded him from unscripted situations. But this also left him vulnerable. Unable to grasp contracts or negotiations, he signed deals far below his worth simply because he couldn't understand the business terms involved. Despite everything, Hunter maintained a long career thanks to his genuine charm, emotional warmth, and likability. His limitations weren't due to laziness. He simply struggled intellectually in ways the studio system chose to hide rather than support. Where Hunter's career survived through heavy management, the next star's brilliance was ignored entirely, buried under Hollywood's obsession with appearance. Hedy Lamarr. The dumb beauty who outsmarted everyone. Hedy Lamarr was marketed in the 1940s as nothing more than Hollywood's most beautiful woman, a glamorous screen idol whose value, according to studios, stopped at her face. What the industry ignored was that Lamarr was a brilliant inventor whose ideas would eventually help enable GPS, Bluetooth, and secure Wi-Fi. While Hollywood dismissed her intelligence and cast her in roles focused solely on beauty, Lamarr spent her nights experimenting and designing. Alongside composer George Antheil, she co-created a frequency-hopping spread-spectrum system intended to prevent enemy forces from jamming Allied torpedoes during World War II. It was a groundbreaking idea, decades ahead of its time, but the military sidelined it, and studios hid her involvement, believing a glamorous actress couldn't also be a serious inventor. The disconnect between her public image and her private achievements was profound. At industry events, she attempted to join scientific conversations only to be brushed off by people who assumed she had nothing meaningful to contribute. Hollywood actively downplayed her intellect, blocking articles about her inventions because they didn't fit the beautiful but simple persona crafted for her. Lamarr resented the way she was treated, later remarking that glamour required nothing more than standing still and looking stupid, a role she never wanted. Recognition finally came in the 1990s, when engineers rediscovered her patent and acknowledged its importance to modern wireless communication. She received the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award in 1997. Despite her achievements, Lamarr died still remembered more for her beauty than her scientific contributions, even though millions now use technology rooted in her work. Linda Darnell. The beauty who struggled to read her lines. In the 1940s, Linda Darnell was one of 20th Century Fox's most prized stars. Her striking beauty, flawless features, and intense screen presence made her a natural fit for leading roles alongside icons like Tyrone Power and Henry Fonda. Yet behind the glamour was a challenge that made every production unexpectedly difficult. Darnell reportedly had serious trouble reading and processing written material. Table readings were notoriously painful. She frequently lost her place, misread words, or misunderstood the meaning of lines. Though never formally diagnosed, such evaluations were rare at the time. Her difficulties resembled what would today be recognized as dyslexia or a similar learning disorder. Hollywood, however, had little awareness or patience for such issues. To compensate, directors often had to feed her every line, demonstrating the exact tone and emphasis for her to repeat. Filming became slow and exhausting, as scenes with even modest dialogue required multiple takes. Crews quietly planned extra time around her scenes, knowing that a single page of script might take an entire day to complete. Darnell developed coping strategies that became part of her reputation. She frequently pushed to reduce her dialogue or replace lines with expressive gestures, not out of laziness, but as a way to work around her limitations. Off-screen, she avoided reading whenever possible, relying on others to summarize information for her. Despite these obstacles, Darnell sustained a successful career, testament to her emotional intelligence, on-camera instincts, and the studio system's ability to adapt when a star had commercial value. She connected with audiences not through verbal precision, but through raw presence. Her story is especially poignant in hindsight. Today, learning differences receive understanding and accommodations. In the 1940s, such struggles were misinterpreted as personal failings. Darnell was trapped between a studio unwilling to acknowledge her difficulties publicly and an industry unequipped to offer meaningful support. She carried the burden alone, even as her performances continued to captivate audiences. John Derek. The director who believed beauty was a substitute for filmmaking. John Derek's career represents a rare form of Hollywood incompetence, one driven not by lack of opportunity, but by an obsessive fixation on female beauty that overshadowed every basic element of cinema. After a modest acting career in the 1940s and 50s, known more for his looks than talent, Derek reinvented himself as a director. His real notoriety, however, came from his marriages to exceptionally beautiful women, most famously Bo Derek, whom he married when she was 19 and he was 49. Once behind the camera, Derek produced films so devoid of narrative, structure, and craft that they became accidental case studies in what happens when aesthetics replace intelligence. His films were less storytelling and more glamour reels, long, meandering montages of beautiful women posed in exotic settings. Crew members recalled that he showed little interest in coherent scenes, natural dialogue, or character development. If Bo looked good in the frame, he considered the job done. His creative philosophy was astonishingly narrow. He dismissed meaningful sets, lighting design, and emotional tone, believing that visual emphasis on his wife's body was the only component that mattered. To him, lighting existed solely to flatter skin, not to create atmosphere. Storytelling was irrelevant, pacing unnecessary, and motivation an inconvenience. Writers and designers who attempted to discuss narrative structure often found him completely uninterested. Derek's lack of cinematic understanding became most glaring in the editing room. He consistently selected takes based only on how attractive his wife appeared, even if the footage disrupted continuity or made scenes unintelligible. Editors struggled to explain basic narrative coherence to him, only to be met with confusion or indifference. His inability to grasp criticism was equally striking. When films like Tarzan the Ape Man were savaged by reviewers, he appeared genuinely baffled, convinced that showcasing Bo Derek's beauty should have been enough to satisfy audiences. The gap between his understanding of cinema and reality was vast. He saw movies as vehicles for showcasing beauty, not as stories requiring structure or meaning. What makes Derek's case unique is that his limitations weren't hidden by studios or masked by clever collaborators. They were on full display in every film he directed, resulting in works that were visually fixated, narratively hollow, and critically disastrous. As one historian noted, most bad directors fail while trying to create good films. Derek failed because he never understood what a film was supposed to be. In the end, his obsession proved self-defeating. By reducing cinema to little more than attractive images, he inadvertently diminished the very beauty he set out to celebrate. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the hidden chaos of Hollywood's golden age, hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another wild deep dive.